She was just a librarian. Nobody special. But for 30 years, she kept records nobody asked for. When the mayor tried bulldozing her library, she opened that filing cabinet. A political dynasty crumbled. Margaret Chen had worked at the Millbrook Public Library for 34 years. She started as a part-time assistant in 1989, fresh out of library school, idealistic and eager. By 2023, she was the head librarian, the only full-time employee, keeper of a building that most people had forgotten existed. But here's the thing about librarians. They notice patterns. They file things. They remember. And Margaret had been filing things that nobody asked her to file for 3 decades. Town council meeting minutes. Budget reports. Land transfer records. Receipts that somehow made their way into book donations. She never planned to use any of it. But she kept it anyway. Because something felt wrong. And then Mayor Richard Thornton III announced that the historic library would be sold to Pinnacle Development Group for a casino. That's when Margaret finally understood why she'd been keeping those files. To understand what Margaret found, you need to understand the Thornton family. They'd controlled Millbrook since 1947. Richard Thornton I was a war hero who became mayor and served for 22 years. His son, Richard II, took over in 1969 and held power until 1995. And Richard III? He'd been mayor since then. 28 years. The same family. The same office. 3 generations. Nobody ran against them anymore. Why bother? The Thorntons owned the local newspaper. They employed half the town through their construction company. They sat on every board that mattered. And then karma showed up. See, Margaret's late husband had been the town accountant in the 80s. Before he died in 2001, he'd whispered something to her. Something about the numbers not adding up. About money disappearing into shell companies. She didn't understand it then. But she started paying attention. Started keeping copies of things that crossed her desk at the library. Things people donated without looking at what was inside those boxes. What happened next shocked everyone. In 2015, a local estate attorney died. His secretary boxed up decades of files for donation to the library. Old books, mostly. But mixed in with those books were folders. Folders containing correspondence between the attorney and 3 generations of Thorntons. And here's where it gets truly disturbing. The letters detailed something called the Infrastructure Maintenance Fund, a special account created in 1971 to maintain public roads and buildings. Every year, taxpayers contributed to it. Every year, it showed activity. But according to these letters, not a single dollar had actually been spent on infrastructure since 1983. Instead, the money flowed through a law firm in Delaware, then to a holding company in Nevada. Then it vanished. Margaret did the math. At an average of $200,000 per year for 40 years, that was $8 million. Gone. Stolen from a town of 12,000 people who couldn't even get their potholes fixed. For the next 8 years, Margaret became a quiet detective. Every document that came through that library, she examined. Every town record request, she fulfilled with careful attention to what was being asked and what was being avoided. But the betrayer didn't see this coming. She built a timeline. 1971 to 1983, the fund operated legitimately. 1983 onwards, the money started disappearing. What happened in 1983? Richard Thornton II's construction company won its first major contract. A coincidence? Margaret didn't think so. She cross-referenced building permits with actual construction. She found projects billed to the town that were never completed. She found inspections signed off by officials who'd retired years before the dates on the documents. Think about that for a second. They weren't even trying to hide it properly. They'd gotten so comfortable, so confident in their invincibility, that they'd become sloppy. And sloppiness leaves trails. Trails that a patient librarian can follow. Now, let me put this in perspective. Margaret could have gone public at any time. But she knew what happened to whistleblowers in small towns. The Thorntons owned the newspaper. They employed the police chief's brother. The county prosecutor had been Richard's college roommate. Any accusation would be buried, discredited, forgotten. Margaret would lose her job, maybe her home, definitely her reputation. The tables were about to turn. Because in early 2023, something changed. Pinnacle Development Group arrived in town with plans for a $300 million casino resort. They needed land. And the Thorntons had been buying land around the library for years. Now Margaret understood why. The library sat on prime real estate. It was the last piece they needed. And here's the twist that changes everything. When Margaret researched Pinnacle Development Group, she found something stunning. The company's primary investor? A Nevada holding company. The same Nevada holding company from those old attorney letters. The same company that had been receiving the stolen infrastructure funds for 40 years. Richard Thornton wasn't just selling the library to developers. He was selling it to himself. Margaret knew she couldn't trust local authorities. But she remembered something her husband had said before he died. If the corruption goes high enough, go federal. The FBI has a field office in the state capital, 90 miles away. In March 2023, Margaret drove there with a suitcase full of documents. And this is where it gets good. The agent who met her was skeptical at first. Small-town corruption cases rarely go anywhere. Too much effort, too little impact. But then Margaret showed him the Nevada connection. The interstate wire transfers. The federal land that had been illegally rezoned for the casino project. Suddenly, this wasn't a local embezzlement case anymore. It was federal wire fraud, federal land violations, RICO implications. The agent made some calls. Within 2 weeks, a forensic accounting team was quietly reviewing 40 years of Millbrook financial records. What they found made Margaret's estimates look conservative. The real number wasn't $8 million. It was closer to $23 million. Richard Thornton III had 2 children. His son, Richard IV, worked at the family construction company. Loyal, obedient, expected to become the next mayor. But his daughter, Elizabeth? She'd left Millbrook 20 years ago, moved to California, became a social worker, rarely came home. But what they did next was legendary. The FBI tracked Elizabeth down and showed her what her family had been doing for 3 generations. They showed her the decaying playgrounds, the unfixed roads, the public services that had been gutted while her family got rich. And Elizabeth made a choice. She agreed to wear a wire at the next family gathering. Thanksgiving 2023. What she recorded was devastating. Richard III, bragging about the casino deal. Richard IV, joking about the sucker taxpayers. Her own mother, discussing which offshore account to use for the proceeds. 3 generations of corruption, caught on tape, at a holiday dinner table. December 15, 2023. Richard Thornton III was in his office, reviewing the final casino contracts. He was weeks away from closing the biggest deal of his life. And then the door opened. 4 FBI agents walked in. They had a warrant. They had evidence. They had his daughter's recordings. What would you have done if you saw his face in that moment? Witnesses said he aged 10 years in 10 seconds. His son was arrested at the construction site. His wife at the country club. By the end of the day, every member of the town council who had approved the casino deal was in federal custody. The charges? Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, RICO violations. The investigation expanded to include 16 people, 3 generations of corruption, and $23 million in stolen public funds. The Thornton Dynasty, which had controlled Millbrook for 76 years, collapsed in a single afternoon. The trials took 18 months. Richard Thornton III was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. His son got 15. His wife, 12. The total sentences for all 16 defendants exceeded 140 years of combined prison time. The seized assets, including the Thornton Construction Company, the newspaper, and numerous properties, were liquidated. The proceeds, combined with federal restitution orders, created a fund of over $31 million. And that money? It went back to Millbrook. The roads got fixed. The playgrounds got rebuilt. The library? It wasn't just saved. It was declared a historic landmark. They renamed the main reading room the Margaret Chen Community Learning Center. But here's what I need you to remember. Margaret wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't a detective. She wasn't some crusading journalist. She was a librarian who paid attention, who kept records, who waited patiently for the right moment. And when that moment came, she was ready. I've told you stories about revenge before. Stories about karma catching up. But this one's different. Because Margaret didn't seek revenge. She sought justice. And there's a difference. Revenge is emotional. It's reactive. It often destroys the person seeking it as much as the target. Justice is patient. It's methodical. It builds a case brick by brick until the structure is undeniable. Margaret waited 34 years. Think about that. Most of us can't wait 34 minutes when we feel wronged. But she understood something that the Thorntons never did. Time favors the prepared. The Thorntons got comfortable. They got sloppy. They assumed that because they'd gotten away with it for so long, they always would. But Margaret was filing, recording, waiting. And when the right moment came, she had everything she needed. Not revenge. Evidence. That's the difference between a moment of satisfaction and lasting justice. How many Thorntons are out there right now? How many small towns are being drained by families who've held power so long that nobody questions them anymore? How many quiet observers are sitting on evidence, afraid to come forward because they know the system protects the powerful? The FBI estimates that local government corruption costs American taxpayers over $4 billion every year. $4 billion. That's roads not fixed, schools not funded, services not provided. It's happening in your town too. Maybe not as dramatically as Millbrook, but it's happening. The question is, who's paying attention? Who's keeping records? Who's waiting for the right moment? Margaret's story isn't just satisfying because karma delivered. It's important because it shows what one person with patience and evidence can accomplish against an entire system designed to protect the corrupt. Because I believe there's a Margaret watching right now. Someone who's noticed something wrong. Someone who's been keeping quiet because they think they can't make a difference. Someone who's been told that fighting the system is pointless. This story is for you. You don't need to be powerful. You don't need to be connected. You don't need to be brave in the way movies show bravery. You need to be patient. You need to keep records. You need to wait for the right moment. And when that moment comes, you need to be ready. Margaret retired last year. She spends her time now at the learning center that bears her name, teaching children how to research, how to verify information, how to find the truth in a world full of lies. She's training the next generation of people who pay attention. The Thorntons thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. Karma delivered. And it was a 67-year-old librarian who signed for the package. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed something wrong that everyone else seemed to ignore? Have you ever collected evidence, even when you didn't know why? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear that patience and evidence can defeat power, share this video with them. Subscribe if you haven't already because we find stories like this every week. Stories where the powerful think they've won. Stories where karma takes its time. Stories that prove that in the end, the truth has a way of coming out. I'm not saying it's easy. Margaret waited 34 years. But I am saying it's possible. The Thorntons controlled Millbrook for 76 years. Margaret ended that dynasty in a single afternoon. Because she was ready. Are you? That's how karma delivered for Millbrook. A quiet librarian. 30 years of patience. And one devastating afternoon that ended a 76-year dynasty. Subscribe, and hit that bell because next week, we've got a story about a secretary who brought down a Fortune 500 company with a single email she wasn't supposed to see. You won't want to miss it.